So, thank you very much for agreeing to be in this intentional series.
Okay.
Yeah, today is the 20th of January, 2021, and I have with me, uh, is it Mrs. Swanson now, or are you still going by Drinkwater?
Uh, yeah, I haven't officially changed my name. So yeah, Drinkwater. Artist name, Jennifer Drinkwater.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have artist Jennifer Drinkwater with us today from Ames, Iowa. She's joining us from her sofa in her living room.
Yep.
And this is a new project I'm beginning. Before we go into this, I want to give some background for the viewers. Um, Miss Drinkwater, or Mrs. Swanson, however that is, was one of my professors at Iowa State back when I was getting my graduate degree from 2012 to 2015. I believe you came in around 2013. Is that correct?
I have been at Iowa State since 2007. So
Oh, you had.
yeah, so it may just have been that I wasn't teaching the graduate students when you started. Yeah, so
Okay.
I've been there for a while.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, Jennifer and I worked together when I was in my grad program. Now, she wasn't one of my thesis professors, but I relied on her for a number of things, and she was an invaluable resource. At the time, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, we will talk about this. And this, honestly, is the reason why I reached out to you like first. I didn't realize you painted.
Really?
Yeah, when you were at Iowa State, you and I had Aaron, you and Aaron had me for dinner one night, and I saw your cross stitching and some of the things you're working on. But it didn't dawn on me, or maybe I didn't put two and two together, that you were a painter as well. And when I saw your paintings, I was like, oh, I have to get her on here. So thank you for agreeing, and thank you for being one of my first
Yeah, you're welcome.
interviewees.
Thanks
Now,
for the invite.
you're now I'm going to go into a little bit about why I started this, and this is probably um, something that we'll touch on in a couple of minutes about your What's Good project, because I found that to be fascinating. Um, my reason for starting this and I'm viewing this as a finite project. I don't know how long it's going to go. I don't know how many interviews I'm going to do, but I've got a list of 22-ish people that I know who are artists or creative types, ranging from you to Arthur Croyle. I met Alex Gray and had a really excellent conversation with him. Hopefully I can get him. Do you know who he is?
Mm-mm.
So Alex Gray did the artwork for the band Tool, their album covers. And
Oh,
he lives in
cool.
upstate New York, and I've actually met him and had a good conversation. I also have the daughter of my oldest friend. She's 9, and she shows amazing creative potential, and she actually just got her first commission. So I wanted to take a step outside of my own realm and ask the questions that rattle around in my head of other artists. And that's the purpose of this project. And it sounds
Cool.
like you're doing a lot of the same things in your What's Good project. And the reason why I bring that up is because one of the things that struck me, like really, wow, okay, that's good, is you stated early on in your What's Good project manifesto, if I can use that word, that you wanted to do this project as a way of changing your way of thinking. And I
Mhm.
found that to be really fascinating because we as artists, and I know you highlighted some of this in uh, your history or your bio. We have negative connotations about what it means to be an artist, and a lot of those connotations are words that start with narsa and end with ism. You know, and a lot of those same types of stereotypes or tropes can be true of us, that we are somewhat self-involved, and it's always a challenge to get outside of ourselves and think about others. And so before we go into the What's Good project, I was hoping you could fill my viewers in on some of your fairly eclectic upbringing. I mean, you've led a fairly interesting life, lived in diverse places, including Kenya, if I believe right.
Yeah, that was for about 9 weeks, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, something like it was short term.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. This is super fun. Yeah, my name is Jennifer Drinkwater. I was born and raised in Mississippi. I was born in the Mississippi Delta, which is the northwest corner of the state. It's the poorest part of the poorest state in the nation. So that I think, and I grew up in a kind of an unconventionally progressive politically family in a very red state. So that, I think has a lot to do with where my artwork has kind of gone and where it's landed. So that, that's important, I guess, to think about. I went to undergrad at Tulane University in New Orleans, where I studied cultural anthropology and studio art at the same time. So those sorts of things didn't really intersect then. I couldn't make them overlap, but studying both of those at the same time, I think kind of melded together in grad school. In the summers, I would work on and volunteer and lead trail crews on the Appalachian Trail. So I kind of escaped the heat of New Orleans and lived in the mountains for a while. Um, I was a debutante at one point in Mississippi, like my junior year of college. This was at a point when I was like had a nose ring and I didn't shave my legs, and so it was this sort of like I don't even know what that was about. I think it was trying to understand Mississippi culture,
Okay.
in a way so I could, like, criticize it, like, authentically in some way, it's like I don't know. Let's see. After college, I lived for a year in the woods of Western Massachusetts in, Holly State Park and took part in a Student Conservation Association program. I had
So
graduated. Yeah,
can I pause? That's fascinating. You lived for a year in the
yeah.
woods. Now, I mean, for the viewers who don't know, right now I currently reside in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and it can get a little cold. It doesn't get Iowa cold, but in the winters, it's not something you want to be outside 24/7. Talk to me about
Well,
that.
so I lived in a cabin in the woods. I probably should have specified that. Yeah. It was with 16 other people. It was a two-room cabin. It was a large cabin in a state park, and it was a Student Conservation Association program, which was kind of like it was funded by AmeriCorps. So it was a year-long residential program where half the year we taught environmental education to middle school students in the area, and the other half of the year, the warmer part of the year, we participated in trail crew restoration and renovation around the state of Massachusetts.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, after that, section hiked a third of the Appalachian Trail by myself. I didn't know what to do. I had always wanted to be an artist ever since I was a little kid, and various people along the way had kind of patted me on the head and told me, "You're too smart to be an artist. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. Double major." All of this sort of stuff. And so I applied and got into a program to get my master's in environmental education up in New Hampshire and dropped out of the program before I even started. Moved to Atlanta, took a couple of classes in painting at Georgia State to get my portfolio together, and then applied for grad school. And so I went to grad school in um, at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina, and studied painting for 3 years. And then I moved to Iowa uh, right after that in 2007, and I've been in Iowa ever since. It feels like the last, like, 15 years of my life has been really stable and kind of like, I mean, I don't wanna say boring, but because it hasn't been intellectually, but, like, I haven't done a lot of the crazy adventures that I did in my early 20s, like, the summer after my sophomore year is when I was in Kenya. It was a archaeology program through Rutgers University,
Wow.
and, and it was super fun. We really did live, like, on a cabin on the beach of Lake Turkana, which was right near where the Leakey family's archaeological dig sites were.
Okay.
And it was just awesome. It was really cool. So I love traveling. I love learning about how other people live, seeing other places, just kind of getting out of myself, getting out of my brain. So that's always been a really important value to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Um, you mentioned earlier that you had always wanted to be an artist, but people did their best to talk you out of that. I think that's a common theme for a lot of
Yes.
us, that when we hear about like people who are artists, it's the phrase that always is associated with it is starving artist. And the idea that people want the best for you, and they think they're doing you a favor by trying to talk you out of it, but what they're really doing is creating many more reasons to sit on a couch in front of a therapist
Right.
later in
That's
life.
correct. That's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
So talk to me about like, and this is always something that's interesting because and I have a question here, but I want to give just a moment background. When I was in my 20s, and I had pushed aside the idea of being an artist for a long time. I didn't actually fully embrace that until I was in my mid to late 20s. And I was kvetching with a friend of mine and having this existential moment. And I said, Dave, I am so bad at so much and so good at so little. And just flippantly, he looked at me and goes, well, makes it easy to concentrate then, doesn't it? But like, well, screw you, man. I'm having a crisis.
Yeah.
So the idea that there's a compulsion that for those of us who find ourselves, for better or worse, in the field of art, there's a compulsion, whether it's in music or dance or performance or visual arts, there's a compulsion that we just can't get out of us. Talk to me about your experience with that, please.
So it's a blessing and a curse, in a lot of ways. It's the albatross,
Yeah.
and and some days I feel most days, every day, I feel so lucky to wake up and know beyond a shadow of the doubt of what it is that I get to do that makes me happy and feel fulfilled. And
Mm.
I don't think I know a lot of people don't have that. They haven't landed on what it is they're passionate about. And so, for all of us who are creatives, we knew that real early, whether we embraced it fully or not, you know.
When was your earliest? Like
Oh,
earliest, like click,
like
like light bulb, light,
5.
light bulb moment?
5 or 6. I mean, I took art lessons from 1st grade on. Um, and I spent the summer after my sophomore year in high school at the Savannah College of Art and Design for like a summer program, and came home hell bent determined I was going to go to art school. And my dad put the squash on that. He was like, no, you're not. You're going to go to a liberal arts or a university, and you can major in art, but you're not going to an art school. You need a backup plan. And I mean, he's a lawyer, right? So like nobody in my family, no, like we don't know where the art thing came from, because like nobody in my family has any kind of artistic bent to them, um, or not outwardly. I guess I have both my grandfathers were musicians.
Okay.
One of my grandfathers played forever a trombone until he was 90, until he died.
Wow.
But it wasn't his career. It was more of a like a serious hobby. So, so yeah, I mean, I had, tons of teachers. I was a high honor roll student. So a lot of teachers were like, you're not going to be an artist. People who are artists are people who can't succeed in any other area. I mean, that was the lesson, right? That was the message I got. Like, you
Right.
can't, the backup plan for people who like really don't have anything else going on. So, so when I went to Tulane, I took painting class my first semester. I was so excited and took art classes every semester throughout college and fell in love, like not romantically, but loved my painting professor. She was about 40. And her name was Sandy Chisholm. She passed away in 2012. Rest in peace, Sandy.
Oh.
And she was just awesome. She grew up in Kansas, wonderful painter, and just I remember going into her office. That was back in the days when you could smoke cigarettes, in your office. This is like the late 90s or whatever. And so she would smoke all over. She'd ride her bike from class smoking a cigarette on her bike. And just being like, I want to be an artist, but I don't want to be at the time I said prima donna. Like, it felt to me to be kind of self-indulgent. I love the act of painting, but I didn't know what it could help. And I think maybe growing up in Mississippi, I was hyper aware. You're hyper, unless you're totally an ostrich, you're hyper aware of all of the, inequity and challenges and civic issues that exist in the world. And to be an artist felt selfish, you know. And, I was getting all these other pressures from other people of like, first of all, you have more to contribute than art. I mean, that was kind of what I interpreted. And at that point, I didn't know any artists who were kind of activist artists or doing anything beyond creating beautiful paintings or pieces of art and then showing them in a gallery or museum.
Mhm.
And she was like, well, you don't have to be a prima donna to be an artist. And like I got that intellectually, but I didn't really believe her.
Mm.
And so yeah, I didn't really fully embrace that I could be an artist or wanted to do that until I was probably 24. Um and first of all, I didn't know how I was going to make a living. And I'm one of those people who's like, I like health insurance. I'm not going to lie. I like to know where I'm kind of high anxiety. So I like to have a little bit of stability.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me like, oh, I can be Sandy. I can teach college. I can that's the best of both worlds. I can have a job and then I'll have summers and I'll make art. And so that's when I was 24. That's when I was like, I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to major or get my MFA in painting, which is a terminal degree. And then I'm going to teach college and I'm going to have tenure by 40. That was like the goal minded me. Um, and so that's what I did. I mean, I'm 40, I'll be 42 before I get tenure. So I'm off a couple of years, but for the most part, it worked out.
I mean, that's an astonishing accomplishment because there are some of us that are still trying to figure out how to maintain a stable income and get health insurance. And we're
Right.
we're 10 years older than that, right?
Right.
So, you know, just to piggyback for a moment on, and I find part of the purpose of this project is to compare by contrast, sometimes. And one of the things that you stated was, you grew up in Mississippi and art was antithetical to the Mississippi perspective at the time, right? Because you saw a lot of inequity, a lot of impoverished people, and from the, if you go almost 1,000 miles north or 800 miles north up into Iowa, when I was growing up, it was the exact same reaction. Oh, you don't do art. This is Iowa. You don't do there. We don't have artists. But it was
Right.
for a different reason. It was because the vast majority of the state was designated farmland. And by God, you're either a factory worker or you're a farmer, or if you live in Iowa City, you're a doctor or a teacher. But that's it. No one
Yeah.
goes outside of this box. And so what I find interesting is the dynamic tension is the same, but the motives behind the dynamic tension are different.
Yeah.
So you've covered, just being compelled to create. You covered your one of your important mentors that got you to a uh, a stable in practicality.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Being a teacher while still being able to be an artist.
Yeah.
So, you and I met at Iowa State, And at the time when I came into the grad program, Iowa State, from my perspective, was looking for an identity. And in the last 5 years since I've graduated from that program, looking back, seeing some of the things that you and the other professors have enacted, it seems like there's much more of a sense of that identity. And so I was wondering if you could talk about how Iowa State has changed in terms of its undergrad and its grad program, because University of Iowa has more of the graduate courses that are quote unquote fine art, like sculpture, whereas Iowa State has some of the more craft oriented arts like jewelry design. So it was divided up, but Iowa State found a way around that, and they created, when I was there, the integrated visual arts program. So you could do various things, and there were people who were doing mixed media and so on and so forth. So can you talk to me about how Iowa State has changed and evolved, and how that identity has become more actualized?
That is a great question, and I hope I have a good response for that. I think it's kind of indicative of not just Iowa State, but kind of the changing higher ed art culture. Because I think people are, as in a lot of contemporary art, we're we're integrating more, right? We're like looking at context and concept versus material. Or if we are looking at material, it's kind of how what is the cultural impact or the context of the material versus it just being like a very technical based education. And so I feel like Iowa State has kind of evolved in a way of looking at, in terms of craft. I guess when I think about that, it's like the production of certain materials. So you've got like textiles and ceramics and wood and metals, and so it's more like traditionally function over form. And I think Iowa State in the last 5 years, we've hired a bunch of people whose work is really interdisciplinary. So like Austin Stewart, who kind of bridges between digital media and sculpture. And we've got Olivia Valentine, whose work deals with textiles and photography and installation. And so it's people who have physical, like kind of technical and material expertise, but they also understand the history and the context of where those techniques came from, and they're merging them with others to create kind of new meaning. And so it's been really pretty awesome to be a part of. I mean, I guess, and so when I started at Iowa State in 2007, I was hired to teach beginning drawing to our freshman students. And so I came in as a lecturer fresh off the boat from grad school. And in 2015, my job changed and I became a tenure track professor with a position with Iowa State Extension and Outreach. So I taught less studio based classes and more classes that look at how art is used to build community, because I'm the community art specialist for Iowa State. And so again, it's that same idea of how is art used in the world? Like, how does it move beyond the studio and function in our culture and in our buildings and in our lives? And I think that's kind of where Iowa State is moving in terms of its art program. It's hard to say though. I mean, we're like, you're able, as I think from a bigger, more objective perspective, because you were a student and you've left and you can kind of see what's happening. I'm so in the weeds of the program in some ways that it's hard to see like, oh, is it changing? Is our perspective like, that's good. I think, we're responding to kind of what's going on in the world. But higher ed programs all over the country, probably all over the world, are in trouble,
Yeah.
in terms of lack of funding and decreasing enrollment. And so we're having to respond to that in ways that forces us to think, how are we relevant? Like, how are
Yeah.
we preparing young people to go out into the world and respond creatively to the challenges at hand and be able to support themselves, like make a living so they don't have to, then pivot and like go and sell insurance. Not that there's anything wrong with selling insurance, but you want to be able to use your degree.
Right, absolutely. So a momentary aside on that before I go on to the next, there's a great segue in what you were just talking about.
Okay.
But there's a liberal arts and war college near where I live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is, if you're unfamiliar with, well, you were on the Appalachian Trail. I'm fairly close to that. Gettysburg is only about 35 miles down the road.
Okay.
So Dickinson College, which is the one I'm referencing here, has a war college, but war college meaning they are historians. Well,
Sure.
I submitted my application for a professor position in sculpture for an upcoming opening that they have for fall of 2021. Part of the application packet that they wanted me to submit was they wanted me to design a course and submit a sample syllabus.
Mhm.
And what I did was, because this was, it's still something I'm struggling with. I'm 52 years old. I've been out of grad school for 5 years, almost six, and I'm still struggling with this basic fundamental thing, which is, if you don't become a professor, how do you take your degree and do something fundamental with it? So I
Mhm.
designed a course that's a grad level course based on branding, art as brand, artist as brand, finding an audience, building that audience, and monetizing that audience.
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
Because that's, I mean, if you, when I was having a conversation with somebody about 2 years ago, and they just pulled back the curtain, historically speaking, and gave me a perspective that made me see how right now we're in the midst of a change. And
Mhm.
you alluded to that, and this is what brought this up. When art was in its early stages, the church was the major patron. Then with the rise of the middle class, then you had the wealthy middle class landowners, business owners, who became the major patrons of the arts. Then it became academia. Now we're seeing a shift to a monetized audience online.
Thank God too. I mean,
Yeah,
from my perspective, like it's super exciting.
it is, but it's, the rule book isn't written, so there's a
Mm-mm.
lot of trial and error out
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
And what you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, before my long diatribe, was the shifting nature of thought in higher academia and higher education. And I find that fascinating, because what we're looking at is, in your What's Good project, and this is probably a good time for us to segue into that. It's more about community now. It's more
Yeah.
about the integration in that of community with the art to, and I love the term, and whether you came up with it or you found it somewhere else, was asset based, recognizing that there are assets that improve or standardize our quality of living within our community. And how do we take those assets, maximize their benefit for not just a select group of people who are at the top of the echelon trading the blue chip art, but for the people who are the everyday individuals who live and work in that community. So this is probably a great segue. How, not how, would you talk about the What's Good project for me, please?
Yes, I would love to. So the What's Good project is a couple different things. To your point about kind of online community building and business development, the What's Good project is absolutely entrepreneurial sort of like experiment in that way. It was a very deliberate decision of mine to see how I could connect with and like create a target market or find my target market and target audience for a specific body of work that I was creating without the mediators of galleries. And if I did not have to give 50% to a gallery, what could I do with that money that again like reinforce those community values? And so
And
that is how that started.
and that's where you're taking a portion of the proceeds and donating it back to the community.
That's
So
right.
if I get that right, you're interviewing, having conversations with people from various communities, not just one or two, and you're
Hmm.
doing specific paintings based on the things that other people deem as assets in their community. And an asset might be a boat ramp
That's right.
to a fishing spot.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah. So the What's Good project kind of. So I learned a lot when I started working for Extension. I have zero community development background. I don't have any arts administration background. I basically was an extroverted artist who liked talk and shop with people, and so that helped me become this extension person. And so asset-based community development is absolutely kind of a theory or school of thought in the community development realm. And so basically it is the macrocosm of gratitude. If you think about it that way in a community, and there's research to back this up, that if you focus on what's working and capitalize on what's working in a community and continue to develop those strengths, that improves communities at a much faster rate than if you get together and try and pinpoint what's wrong and challenges, because it spirals down into a bitch fest, which is awesome. Isn't that cool?
I love that. Um, I love that way of thinking. And that to me is the shift, right? That to me
Exactly.
denotes the shift, because we are, I mean, and I'm not going to get into politics, but we can look at 2020 as exactly that challenge. Are we going to focus on the things that are uh, damned and try and
Right.
fix those? Or are we going to focus on the things that are, that are the beautiful shining lights of our humanity? And I
Totally.
think that summarizes what 2020 has been, because there have been so many near catastrophic moments and such a prolonged period of stress for so many people. And thank God we have a platform like Zoom that has risen to the challenge, that reinforces our connection and brings us into almost like a new era, a new way of being able to create community
Yeah.
that's not necessarily within arm's reach.
Yeah.
To wrap up my, again, long diatribe, because I tend to be long-winded.
No, you don't.
um, there's a great lyric that is, I'm not going to plug this person's music, but there's a great lyric. And I think what you're talking about is a hard and fast example of doing the right thing. I
Yeah.
never learned to count my blessings. I choose instead to dwell in my disasters. And I can think of so many people. There are so many people who just live their lives that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's exhausting to be around. And it's easy. It's a default, right? It's
It
like I read
is.
there's a quote somewhere, I can't remember who, but some people find fault like buried treasure.
Uh-huh.
It's like they look for, and I, this is definitely the case in academia, because it is not um widely culturally acceptable in academia to be vulnerable or optimistic, because we, like, the whole culture of academia is based on critical thinking, right? So
Right.
you're looking for holes, you're looking for what's wrong, you're looking for, well, don't get too excited, let's talk about how this is problematic, and that's exhausting, right?
It is.
uh for me it's exhausting, and I can fall into that very easily, and so I have to make this active point of looking at, let's focus on what's working. And I think that's what's so cool about asset-based community development, is that there is research to say that that's not just Pollyanna. It is actually an effective strategy in communities. And so if it's effective in communities, it's going to be effective in your own life also, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. So that more or less, that one nugget sums up the What's Good project, correct?
Correct. Yes. And
Okay.
it's not about, oh, can I just say one more thing?
Please, please, please.
Yeah. It's not about like ignoring trauma, right? This project is not about like putting a blind eye and not looking at the ills of culture. In fact, most of the stories and communities that I'm drawn to, um, and the assets that I like to highlight, or paintings I like to create, are about normal community members who are acting in courageous ways in the face of injustice or the face of civic challenges, and who are showing strength and courage of character and acting positively in spite of those things. Does that
Right.
make sense?
It
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Which leads me to now you're also doing a series of interviews with other artists, and I noticed that your first one, I didn't read through all of the three that you had posted on your website, was Jordan. Now he's a new asset to Iowa State.
Yes. Yes. So Jordan Brooks is awesome. He is our multicultural liaison in our college, and he actually is from Pennsylvania, which is funny.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what part?
I can't remember. I should know. I
It's a
can't
big state.
remember. It
Anyway,
is a
go ahead.
big state. And yeah, he's an artist. He started at Iowa State last March, about a year ago. His wife has worked there for several years, and he was actually I think a resident director, student advisor at Grinnell College just down the road, but then this
Yeah.
position opened up in the college, and so he got hired with us. But he's an artist. He has an art and psychology background, and so he's all about using art for community development and the community building with students. And it's just he's a great guy. We're super lucky to have him in the college. He's awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you did an interview with him, and you did an interview with a couple of others as well. Did you come up with that set of questions, and are the questions the same for each artist?
Yes, they are. It is. Yeah. It's not an in-depth interview, obviously, like this one, where it's a lot of research. It's more of like, um, I thought about trying to pull back the curtain for people who are not artists, or young or emerging artists, early career artists who maybe are interested in, like, how I was, like, what can art do for a greater community but don't have any knowledge. And so it's more of like a snapshot
Mhm.
for people to see how art can benefit community and how these practitioners work. So it's a standard set of like 10 or 11 questions, I can't remember. And so when I connect with artists, and it's primarily just been Iowa artists, because I anticipate this will be kind of an extension, I don't know, document at some point, for Iowa communities, is to kind of they can self-select how they respond. So they can respond in written form. Some people choose to do interviews, and so we have a conversation, and then I transcribe the interview. So it just varies. But I'm actually going to start one this spring that's it's a similar set of questions, but it's for community arts leaders in Iowa, of how they
Okay.
respond, how they use art. So yeah, it's basically a guest blog post. It's not really it's not like this.
Well, I appreciate that, because Iowa is in the bottom, at least it was when I left Iowa State, in terms of state spending on the arts, is in the
Uh,
bottom five.
I don't know. I think we're up to like the bottom 10, but yeah,
That's a
we're still
significant
below.
improvement, but that's a lot of way to go. That's a
We're
long way to go.
Mississippi still spends more money than Iowa on the arts.
That you have, and what's crazy is that just north of Iowa, Minnesota is in the
Oh, and
top 5%
they
or
are
top
the
five.
top. They are the top. They're
Yeah,
the top. Yeah.
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 They spend more per capita than any on the arts
Mhm.
than any other state. And what this is, I didn't really think about this in the context of the purpose of me doing these interviews, but I've used this enough, this understanding, this kind of epiphany that I had a while ago, that art is community's conversation with itself. And what we have is a dynamic, an economic dynamic that does not recognize the invaluable, the priceless commodity that is culture's conversation. So going back to put a pin in the whole What's Good project is, with this shift that you are highlighting through your What's Good project, to me, that's one of those ways. When you say asset-based community, that is such an empowering thing, because it gives the people who are in those communities, the ability to, even if it's not a huge amount, to possess their own assets And really, that is a pretty significant human right
Mhm.
that is oftentimes just like stripped away from us.
Right. Well, and it's
So
easy to live somewhere and look around and be like, this place sucks, like familiarity breeds contempt.
yeah,
Um, and it's just so easy to complain. It is
yeah,
easy to complain, but I do think, and I think this speaks to kind of a bigger, broader conversation too about rural versus urban, rural America. I think there's a lot of recognition, especially with the pandemic, of people realizing, people who live in big cities that are expensive, I can work anywhere. I can work remotely. I can move to a smaller place that maybe has like more assets that are, like natural beauty, and set up shop and own a home and work remotely. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the rural urban divide over the next few years as
yeah.
people leave, and how that invigorates and changes kind of culturally within some of these smaller towns. But yeah, I think too, like the What's Good project, it all kind of, I'm describing it. It sounds a little like overly strategic the way I did it. And I mean, I thought about this for a long time because I wanted to think about how I could make more of, like, monetize my work more, like get paid, right? Like I'm making all this
Yeah,
art, and how can I start to kind of, yeah, how could I make a living doing this?
yeah,
Wanted to see if I could do that. And so I think art, it's a we connect with work emotionally. That's what art does, is it makes you feel, right? And so how can we as artists recognize that and embrace that in a way that is more inclusive of the viewer versus being like, well, like, my work speaks for itself. I don't have to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Like, you got to come to a gallery and create this elitist sort of atmosphere for people. um Place is evocative of emotion, right? So if you start
oh, yeah,
creating art about place and telling stories that people recognize in themselves, like, that creates more of an emotional connection, and people buy them. I mean, that's marketing, in some way, and it kind of does it for itself. So I've had people over the last, I mean, in pandemic, I've made more money this past year than I have ever on art, selling art,
yeah.
virtually, which is, I don't know what that says. I think it's maybe people have more disposable income. I've been better about getting work out there for sale. Um, or being better at storytelling, and so you have a lot of I have a lot of people who grew up in these communities or used to live there or still live there, and they're investing in buying prints of their place, as a point of pride in a lot of ways, so I don't know, that was kind of a tangent, but
No, 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 no. It was, there was a lot of good material in that, and
yeah.
um, you know, I work with a business mentor. I
Yeah.
too offer my prints for sale, prints of
Yeah.
my paintings for sale. Hey, puppy.
uh, yeah, this is Muddy. He's from Mississippi
Oh,
also. He's a Mississippi rescue. Yeah, he's just been hanging out.
cool. Um, so I work with my business mentor to get my paintings in front of the right audience. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, marketing is connecting emotionally. One of
Yeah.
the things that, you going back to that point of, the almost the cynical nature of higher education, academia, and the constant critique, is one of the things that we learn, and just going back to remembering when I would write my artist statements about this piece or that piece, it was so removed and detached. I talked about, oh, historically this and this, and the materials and this and this, and there was no sense of, here's why I was moved to do this.
Right. Yeah.
um, since I'm not in academia, I started shifting. And it took a lot. It took a lot from my business mentor to get me out of that, to tell the story of the emotion behind why I do what I do. But since I've done that, the connections are so much more genuine
Yeah.
because people do buy on emotion, and that's part
Yes.
of the storytelling thing. The storytelling nature of creating is, I don't care about the fact that you broke up with your dog and your dog cheated on you with another dog.
Yeah.
It's the narrative, it's the emotion, the connectivity that we all suffer, but we all have the ability to not suffer.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's yeah, that's good. So that brings me to your paintings.
Yeah.
When I discovered your paintings, now I do like your time dependent pieces, the ones that are such an involvement of time that are quite literally Time magazine covers when you cross stitch.
Yes.
They're contemplative but also playful,
Yeah.
and some of them can have a kind of a sharp edge to them when they point out the kind of narcissistic nature of man or of humanity. But your paintings, where did you come up with that style?
Well, I guess
Because
I didn't realize you didn't know I did. When did you discover I painted? Like
like
a few
a
weeks
month
ago?
ago, yeah,
Really? Wow.
yeah.
No, I have an MFA in painting. Like painting's been my first love forever. That's so funny.
Well, I knew
That
you
is.
taught drawing, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that you painted.
Oh yeah. No, I mean I absolutely identify as a painter. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'll give it to Sandy Chisholm, my mentor, and then another my grad school mentor was an artist named Paul Hartley. He also has passed away. Don't paint with oil, people. You get weird cancers. Both of these people died early of very strange cancers.
Oh, I paint with
Um
oil.
oh, I don't paint with oil. Just make sure you
Acrylic.
have good ventilation and wear gloves.
No and no.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, be careful.
Oh, I
Sandy
know.
also smoked. Um,
Well, I don't. No, I don't do that. Well, I don't
okay.
smoke cigarettes.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's better. That's fine. So yeah, they both had these kind of weird, not, I don't want to say weird, but maybe, lots of layers. Both of them
Yeah,
painted with lots and lots of layers, and they let you see the process. There was always a kind of a mirror, or not a mirror, but a window into kind of that first stage of buildup. And I love that. I love that sort of openness. Um, and To me, it's real emotional.
yeah,
I've always been, but they also have both of them had a very just beautiful way of rendering. So they were really skilled in terms of realism, which I'm not as much, but I've always been somebody who's liked to see mark, who's wanted to see a person's hand in the work. And so that's, I guess, why I paint the way that I do. I don't know. When you paint for so long, it's like, I don't know. I don't really know how to paint any other way, It's just, and it doesn't feel different. It doesn't look to me differently than, I guess, other people's work, just how I paint.
well, you say you're not skilled in rendering like realistically or as skilled as those two people you perceive them to have been. However, there is such an ease of structure in your work. Like the spaces are logical and believable, and that lends like trust. It's like you can trust when you go into this emotionally because it's what you perceive. It's structured the same way that reality is. So when I look at your paintings, there's an easy structure that's believable that draws me in, but what keeps me there is your marks. I mean, and your choice of color.
The
You're
color's a little crazy.
well. I mean, now I too paint. Um, I too paint, obviously, but I consider myself a colorist and an expressionist more than I am that structure oriented person. Like to me, the underpainting is not as important as the dynamic of the color that you perceive. That's what creates a lot of that tension. And so when I look at your color, it's it's like I'm looking at somebody who understands color the way I understand color. And I understand color intuitively. And for me, when I looked at your paintings, I was like, wow. And the fact that you can create atmosphere, and that to me is a really trick thing, because a lot of people have the ability to paint, but they're not cognizant or intentional about their atmosphere. And to me, what is beautiful, what I find really truly beautiful, is that every moment of every day, the atmosphere is constantly changing. If you can capture something that may never exist again within your lifetime, that's a spectacular thing. And the feeling of a space at a given time transcends all those other things that we were just talking about. And that's what I was drawn to when I realized you painted.
Well, thank you. You said that way better than I could ever express. And I think because I paint really intuitively,
Mhm.
um, I've never taken a color theory class. I actually think color is something I need to work on a lot. Um, but and I taught painting for 2 semesters, I think, and I hated it. I hated teaching painting. I hated it. And I think it was because I paint intuitively, so it was really hard for me to direct people on how to do it. It was just like, "Well, just paint. I don't know what to tell you. Just make it."
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I can the one that I'm thinking of is the path, when you're looking down that wooded path, and it's like your final layer is with a palette knife. And I can see these big thick marks. And I mean, I'm assuming these paintings are, 2 to 3 feet in each dimension. Am I wrong?
some of them are small. Like
Really?
that one is maybe 16 by 20 inches. Some of them are
Wow.
really big. The smaller ones I tend to get fussy.
Okay.
And I don't like overworked paintings, or
No.
my overworked paintings. I can't, like, if you can't see the energy, it's a disaster. And if you can't see that ease, it's a disaster. That's kind of the intuitive kind of like, um, but I don't consider, like, I look at the work of like Brent Holland or Brenda or Barb, just to talk about people that you and I both
ISU
know.
faculty. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're, to me, much more skilled traditionally painters, because like I don't feel comfortable handling oil very well. I feel like a lot of, yeah, I mean, I've taken quite a number of painting classes, but I feel more, I guess, self-taught in a lot of ways, because I don't have that kind of academic traditional atelier background. That's not something I feel comfortable in. And that's not how I work. I don't know.
So the interesting thing, and this is, camaraderie here, one artist to another. I think we've gotten some of the fundamental things of the interview out of the way, and now we're talking artist to artist.
Yeah.
Um, um, I know my paintings are rudimentary. I know that they would fall in the face of an academic critique, but I have never had a painting class ever. And I focused on sculpture and drawing. I have my undergraduate degree in drawing and my grad in sculpture and mixed media, but I've never taken a painting class. And the interesting thing, and I say this all the time, for better or worse, and I understand. I mean, I will be the first one to point out all the flaws of my paintings, but I never wanted anyone to touch the way I did what I did. I never
Right.
wanted that academic rigor to hone me out of being able to express.
I feel you 100%. Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times, I can look at a lot of those people who are that you mentioned, and they're amazingly accomplished. And there's one person that I'm going to reference from my undergrad at Drake University, who's no longer there. He was the most skilled artist I've ever seen, but I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I looked at them and I was in awe. And he would do these large scale paintings that were like 4 and 5 feet in each dimension. And then he would say how he did certain sections of it with a brush with two hairs. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
That gets to that, back at the beginning of our conversation, somewhat narcissistic nature of the old way of thinking, right? This is all about me and my talent and my skill and how many people are going to love what I do versus, hey, my stuff is for my community. My stuff is for my audience. I want to connect with my audience. And I think that where we're at, what I find interesting, because I'm on the outside, I mean, I'm trying to find that audience. I'm trying to find that space where you do connect with your audience. And there's the you spend time in academia and they want you to do things their way, but then there's a market that wants you to do things their way. And the trick is to maybe find a balance of both.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's worked for me so far, I guess. And I do think there's a lot of overlap in terms of how we have students or young artists write artist statements and then have people, if you think about the business world, they have value propositions, right? And so it's that idea of like, how do you tell your story? It's just in the art world, our audience are our peers. So you create this really insular, like just tiny world that only, if you're trained and you have certain knowledge of certain theories and certain practitioners, then you get it, but everybody else is outside of that world. So it's
Yeah,
this secret language, which to me is gross. Like, what, my audience is not my peers. They're people in community, like you're saying, right? It's I don't write and speak in those same ways as I did when I graduated from grad school. Like, I
yeah,
remember somebody reading one of like my honor or my thesis, my MFA thesis, and being like, this doesn't even sound like you. Like, this language doesn't even sound like your voice. And at the time I was like, well, good. And now I'm like, no. I'm sick of the secret handshake. It's not,
yeah.
why does it matter? How is that helping?
I think it's that, the we hear this term a lot in the current climate, but I think it's that echo chamber of academia.
Right.
And I think that that's where the crucible, like we're looking at two different crucibles. One is academic rigor. Okay, well, you didn't quite, and you're constantly looking for that way of improvement. It's like it's never good enough.
That's
But then
right.
there's the other side of that. Just, I know this is the same point, just stated a different way. But then there's the other side of that, which is the can you sell it? I was
Yeah.
talking with my uncle, who's an accomplished serial entrepreneur. I mean, he owns two jets, for Christ's sake. And he and I were talking one time, and he goes, "So you really made a thing of that art thing, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Are you selling?" And I said, "I better be, otherwise I'm just a painter with a storage problem."
Right. Right. That's right. I mean, and that I think that for too long, academia has sort of like pushed under the rug the market, the idea of a market, the idea of business, the idea of um, hustling. It's like tacky to talk about and think about. It'll
Yeah,
just take, you either find a gallery to do that dirty work for you, or you find an academic position and then you don't have to worry about it. And that's
yeah,
bullshit.
it
Like,
is. It is.
first of all, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for just a second. I feel like it is important, and there's nothing wrong with being unapologetic about wanting to make money and wanting to have
Absolutely.
being financially successful and abundant, especially for minority and marginalized populations, for women to have money, for people of color to have money. That's the way things change. And so to sort of like, there's that common thread in academia that I still hear of people like, well, I'm not doing it to make money. I'm not a sellout. And if you're an artist, you want to sell the hell out. You want to sell.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
And so to pretend like that there is just, it's not helpful. So anyway, I'm trying to embrace that in my own self, and then trying to create maybe a model that other people can look to eventually if they want to make a living from their work. And it is, I mean, I've taken a ton of online business classes. Like, you have a business mentor. There's no telling how many business classes I've taken over the last, well, not I there is. I've taken like 3 over the last 2 years to teach myself all of this stuff because I sure as hell didn't learn it in art school. Nobody's talking about it.
I know,
So
and that goes back to that point about my in my application packet creating that I called it a 511 course. You're
yeah,
far enough along in a grad program that you've gone through the breakdown and you're now starting the build up, and now with the perspective of, okay, I'm getting ready to leave this sequestered environment and go out into the unknown. How do I bridge that gap? How do I identify those people who will be my audience?
right. Yeah, and
And
connect with them.
that's what's beautiful about the fact that we live in a 7.75 billion populous planet, is that your work will find an audience. There are people who will
Totally.
appreciate what you have. There's an audience for every style of work.
Yeah.
Can you find them? Can you tell them why their lives would benefit from this?
Yeah. And I absolutely 100% agree. And I feel like the more clear that young art, not young, anybody, any artist is trying to monetize their work gets on what their value system is and what their story is, the better. Because
Yeah,
that's how you connect with people emotionally, and you got to be okay with writing about your work. You got to be okay with talking about your work. You got to be
yeah,
okay with initiating contact. And I get there's a lot of artists who have a lot of social anxiety, and who do not feel comfortable. And so they would prefer to have a gallery. But getting gallery representation is about as common as getting a tenure track teaching job at this
yeah,
point.
yeah,
And if you get gallery representation, doesn't mean that they're going to sell your work. It means they may sell one or two pieces a year, which is
yeah.
not enough to, and they're going to take 50%.
And
I
they're going to take
mean, because
50%.
yeah, so like you're going to have to hustle and create your own market, even if you have gallery representation.
You
That's
know,
just the deal.
what we're the subtext of the conversation right here is, it isn't okay. It's not workable. It's not a sustainable, tenable situation for an artist just to be an artist anymore. We have to be our own marketing agents, our own.
Absolutely.
It's both a blessing and a curse, because if I get strung out or worn out doing one thing, like working on this guy, I can turn and do something else. Or I've got administrative tasks that require my attention, or I have to do my weekly video updates, or I have to reach out to my people I've sold paintings to in the past and say, hey, I've got a new one coming up. But at the same time, that can also be very taxing.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm hoping to dispel this notion, this untrue notion that artists are incapable, because we have to be more capable, because we don't have people doing those other jobs for us.
no, not at the beginning. I mean, I think eventually you could hire a studio assistant, to take some of those things on, but you have to know, in the business world, they say your copy, right? Like your content. You got to be able
Yeah,
to talk about it. You have to be
yeah,
able to like summarize and synthesize for other people. What's been really helpful for me is to kind of distill down what's been really effective in terms of the business end, and like what are my most profitable actions, and that's painting for sure, right? So I have to make time for that every day. I have an emails newsletter that I send out once a month that is super effective or has been effective in terms of connecting with people, sales, all of that sort of stuff. So I make time for that. I do a weekly blog post, and that drives traffic, right? With this, basically, it gives people a reason to go to the website every week, and generate traffic. And then I'm trying to get better at daily social media posts. And those few things, I mean, I can do those with a full-time job. I can make time for that every week or every month. But I'm not, if I was a full-time artist and I had to do all of that to pay the bills, yeah, it would be all of those things times five, of trying to hustle. And so I feel lucky I'm in a position where I have this other area that pays my bills as I build up this business and expand my network and expand my collectors, that I can, it's not, my feet aren't being held to the fire at this moment, so I realize how lucky that is. But eh, I feel like that you can absolutely make a living as an artist, more so now than any other time, because of social media and the web and all of these all of these online tools that you can get at your fingertips. Like, there's so many free webinars and free PDFs that can kind of help with all of these things that we maybe didn't have, in terms of schooling. And it's kind of exciting. It's just a matter of whether, like, people are interested in taking that on. I find it fascinating and I love it. And I never thought I would love that. I never thought I would love art business at all, but I think it's super cool.
That might be in a period of time a really valuable offshoot of doing this project, is
Yeah.
assembling, providing this kind of community based resource where we're not left out, because it's one of the things that is the hardest, is very, very hard to deal with, is if you're out there and you feel like you're alone, you're going to fall.
Right. Well, and you're seeing the greatest hits of everybody else's art career on social media. So then there's that comparison thing that can be
Oh
very
yeah.
demoralizing.
Yeah. Oh, very, very. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, to there are three more questions that I'd like to ask you, and I appreciate your time very much today.
Yeah.
But before I do, one of the things that I wanted to do is just kind of a teaser for my audience is, and to draw on what you were just talking about. I just had another meeting last night with my business mentor, and we just went over exactly what you just outlined, using your newsletter to drive traffic to your website, sending out an email and how all those things create a strategy.
Yep.
And that's what oftentimes a lot of these artists are missing. And I know I've been missing for a couple of years now, is what's my strategy? Because right now, oh, I'm just going to use social media, and it becomes a shotgun approach, and you throw a little bit over here and then you throw some
That's
money over
right.
there, and you don't have a strategy, you're going to fall. And it's
That's
just going to
right.
be, it's going to be like, no, I need to continue, and I need to do it every week or every other week. I need to do these things. And it's the continuity, because that's what people, that's where trust comes in. If they know you're going
That's
to be there every week at the same time, giving them the information, because it has to be a 75-25 rule. They have to feel like they're getting 75% of the of free content in order for them to pony up 25% in terms of financial support.
that's
So
right.
you have to constantly be providing your audience with content that adds value to their life. And this is what, my work has shifted. It's how can I, and this is what the focus is now for me. How can I add value to other people's lives?
Totally. Yeah.
When I got out of grad school, you saw some of the work that I had done. The technique is vastly, vastly improved for what I was in grad school. But I had a neighbor who passed away and left a widow, and it was sudden. So one of my life callings, like where my heart of compassion is, I'd love to take my skill as making these busts and use them to give value to other people's lives, because I believe that art can help heal.
Hmm.
But we in the West have a fairly standoffish approach when it comes to death and dying. We want to ignore that as long as we can, but that just creates enormous problems.
Hmm.
So I created a bust of this lady's husband, and then I incorporated the urn in the bottom of the base as part of the sculpture, and I actually gave that to her as a gift.
That's super
and
nice.
and
Yeah.
it brought peace to my life, knowing that every day this lady was going to wake up and kiss that her husband on the forehead.
Yeah.
So let me get back to the last three questions, and then we'll kind of try and wrap this up.
Okay.
um Fascinating, one artist to another, multiple disciplines, needlepoint and painting. Talk to me about need and how each of those things scratches a different itch for you?
So painting feels more like going out for a run, maybe. It's more like mentally and physically exhausting because it works a different part of my brain, but I get more of a flow state. It's more gratifying. Embroidery or cross stitching was something was taught by both my grandmothers when I was like 10, and I loved it because it calmed my anxiety that I've always had.
Mhm.
It was like a meditation. And so I did it when I was in middle school until, it became like kind of not cool to do cross stitching, right? So then when I was in grad school, in the midst of all that stress, I picked it back up and started cross stitching. And then didn't really I didn't really have a project in mind. I just was like doing it. And then in 2013, I had just finished a bunch of public kind of art installation pieces of projects that were really like big and metal and involved lots of people. And I just wanted something that I could do by myself quietly. So I created this project, 168 hours. And so I still do it. I mean, I've got one right there. I'm working on It's Trayvon Martin's sweatshirt from 2013. But primarily I do them now at night. When I'm watching like Netflix or something, I'll just sit there and stitch. So it's like a relaxing
Mm.
practice versus painting, which is more like, okay, it's more like your job. You got to be on, you need to do this, like doing sprints or something, and cross stitching is more like yoga. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well, not only does it make sense, but when people ask me, like, because I do sculpture and painting,
yeah.
I can't not do one or the other. I find that if I'm imbalanced, my anxiety goes through the roof. And it's interesting you mentioned anxiety. I didn't realize until this last year how anxious I really was, and I'm
Oh,
finding
yeah.
that a lot of people are far more anxious than they even recognize. But when you said running versus yoga, when people ask me, well, why do you do one? Why do you do the other? Why don't you just focus on one? I'm like, well, one is scuba diving and the other one is mountain biking up a mountain.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
use that metaphor.
Yeah,
And when you were talking about it, comparing it to a physical activity, I'm like,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
So
they're both compulsive. You can't not do one,
no, no,
It's they serve different functions, completely different functions. And
absolutely,
complete and yeah, yeah, totally.
absolutely. Well, thank you. Last couple of questions. Talk to me briefly about your journey to find yourself as an artist. I know you kind of already did by laying out your history and all that good stuff, but I guess I'm asking more from a philosophical perspective or a reflective perspective. What does it mean to you now to have found your place and to have these things align where all of a sudden it seems like there's a common direction for these things that you've worked to integrate into your life?
Oh my god, it feels so good. It really feels like, oh, this is it. This is like it feels really familiar. And really right. I don't know how else to say it. Of just like the feels like home in some
Yeah,
way. In a
yeah.
way that I've never felt about really anything else in my life. It just feels like, okay, this is why I'm supposed to make paintings is this, because otherwise I felt like, oh, I did some really interesting like short-term projects, and I would do like a series of 5 or 6 paintings, then I would jump to something totally different, different scale, different subject matter. And so I'm able to still do that, but just within a bigger structure that serves a bigger purpose that I can feel good about. That feels like it's not just about me. It's not just about my career. Um, I've always loved stories. I've always loved learning about other people's stories. And so I'm able to give a platform to other people through my painting in a way that I have never been able to do in other projects. And that feels really good because
Yeah.
it is more than just about me.
Right.
Um, yeah, feels great.
I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna step out on a ledge here and speculate that, because this is the first time we've actually talked about what it means to be an artist, with each other.
Yeah.
I'm gonna speculate and say that, for me at least, and tell me if this is a familiar experience for you. My whole life, there's been this on the back of my
Hmm.
head, and it's like, this is the way life should be. This isn't what life should be like. This isn't the life you're meant to live. This is where you need to be. And then all of a sudden, I get to a point where things start to align, and you're like, then all of a sudden that scratch goes, no, you got it. You're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I've never been my whole life, I've never been a self-expressive artist. Like I've never painted my feelings. I
Mm,
mean, not directly, I'm sure indirectly, but I've never been someone who's like investigated a personal story or my own life history. That's not where I feel comfortable. So having landed on this other framework does feel like, oh, this is, yeah, you're
yeah.
good. You're good. Calm down. You can just relax for a while.
And that's the remarkable sensation, being
Yeah.
able to relax. And what I mean by that is being able to relax in your own life
Yes.
for
So
the first
nice.
time
Yeah.
and go,
Yeah. And not have like not and I worry now. I mean, I still, we all worry about
right.
what people think about our work, but I worry so much less about how people look at these projects and these paintings because it's not about those people.
No.
It's not about trying to get into a juried show anymore. It's not about my CV. It's not about that.
Yeah.
That sounds really like gross to say it like that, but it's
No, I
true,
I
you
get
know?
what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's serves a bigger purpose than just your own self gratification.
Yeah.
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 So with that in mind, give me your perspective on moving forward. It can be macro, it can be micro, it can be a combination of the two. Just having gotten to a point where these things are aligning with you within the context of your career and your life. What does it look like to look forward from this perspective?
So it's been interesting in the course of doing a lot of these interviews and getting to know people in the community. So I'll go and in 2019, I spent 2 to 3 weeks in Mississippi and just went from county to county and had an interview every county. And it was great connecting with everybody, a lot of people, most people I didn't know before. And I'm super slow with these paintings. I've only finished maybe 2 Mississippi counties out of
Mhm.
the 9 that I interviewed.
Okay.
And just within those 2 counties, the relationships that I established have deepened in a way because I've been able to like send people prints of the paintings and showcased what they're doing. And I didn't anticipate having those relationships continue and being able to like still use the content and the artwork in a way that benefits those communities. Like some of the communities have been able to use the paintings for websites, or different promotional activities and all of that. And so that's been really cool, is to start to think about like, how can I be more deliberate and strategic in ways that again give, and I don't know what that looks like. It could be like licensing fees, or it could be like developing, greeting cards that community we can split the proceeds or something like that. I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know. But that's been really cool, is to think kind of bigger picture about what that would look like. I would love in the next 5 years to have a storefront studio, like have a what's good place. I don't know what that would look like, but that would be awesome. That would be like a community spot of some sort, or I don't know. I don't know. But so that's what I'm thinking of, is like how to, what else can I do? under
Yeah.
this umbrella of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that
Well,
takes
cool.
some money. I gotta work that out first, but I
Yeah.
think I'll get there.
Well, cool. Did I hear a rumor that the grad studios downtown Ames are no longer grad studios?
Yeah. Design on Main shut its doors to Iowa State. It's now a independent bookstore, which is really cool. But yeah, because of the budget cuts with the pandemic, they know there's no longer a downtown studio space for anybody like
That
graphic
makes me
design.
very, very sad.
Oh yeah, I hear you. Same. I spent a lot of hours in that building, as you did. Yeah,
That made my grad career.
yeah,
I love that space.
yeah.
I loved just the being around, and that's being an independent artist. And this is part of the other reason for this project. Just not having that daily interaction with other artists and seeing what creativity looks like from someone else's perspective is a loss.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, you got to talk shop. You need people, you need other people to be like, you're not crazy. This is
I
really
mean,
fun.
you're off, but you're not crazy.
Yeah.
You're a
Like, no,
functioning member of society, but you're not quite what they expect.
well, I remember when I graduated from undergrad, that was like, there was a few pieces of advice that my mentor gave to us. And one of them was like, find a community of artists, like wherever you live. You have to, or, I mean, it doesn't be where you live now because we have Zoom, but yeah, find people that you can celebrate with, bitch to, talk shop, whatever. Yeah, you need that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jennifer, I think that concludes what I wanted to ask. Do you have anything that you have been that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I think that's a lot. I mean, I feel like I've covered everything. Thank you. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. I needed this. I needed to be able to talk some shop too.
Well,
I've just,
good.
got the dog.
And Aaron.
He's and Aaron. I know. So yeah. They're
Okay.
both tired of me. Oh well.
Well, I really, really am genuinely thankful that we had this time because as I was preparing for this, it made me realize this was a good first interview and look at what it means to be an artist from an academic's perspective, somebody who's in academia and how they're going through, the changes in society now. And people are using that term social reckoning, but I like to think of it differently. I like to look at what's happening and realize that the social dialogue is no longer being controlled by one group. Now, there's whether it's been a forced opening for some people or release for others, the conversation is now an agglutination of, in theory, everyone's voice. And
Right.
that was what I was getting at with my questions about how Iowa State has changed, because the academic environment represents that singular voice that we no longer see being relevant. And that's part of what I want to explore through this project is how is the change affecting other artists? And that's why when I was doing the research for this, I looked, and yours seemed like a perfect natural first interview because that's what you talked about. You talked about doing the What's Good project to literally change the way you thought. And I thought
Yeah.
that was great.
Oh,
So
well, thank you.
I want to thank you for being part of the first one. This was, and it will be a learning curve. I'd like to extend an invitation that when I get, in 6 months or a year, maybe we do this again and have, some of the people back on again and do another
Yeah.
interview and see how things change.
That'd be awesome. I would love that. That's cool that
Okay.
you're interviewing Arthur too. I haven't I would
I
we miss Arthur.
I don't know. I haven't extended the invite to him, but he's on my
Oh.
list.
Okay,
I'd
cool.
like to get him because what the perspective that he represents is a retired academician,
Right.
right? Now that he's no longer in academia and he's producing art that is for him. Oop, maybe this will be a little bit. Sun went behind the clouds. Now that he's out of academia, the idea is how does that change? How does his perspective change?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I wanted to interview him, but I haven't approached him yet. So hopefully he'll say yes.
Oh yeah, I bet he will.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
good luck. This is awesome. I'm honored and to have been a part of it and excited to see other interviews, listen to them.
I will keep you apprised, and thank
Please
you
do.
again.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.